Hi, and welcome to the Tristan channel. Today I'll be talking about the B in LGBT+. Bisexuality is romantic attraction, sexual attraction, or sexual behaviour towards both male and females, or to more than one gender. It may also be defined to include romantic or sexual attraction to people regardless of their sex or gender identity, which is also known as pansexuality. Despite tribal behaviour in the LGBT community, there is no major difference between bi or pan. Bisexuality has been observed in various human societies and elsewhere in the animal kingdom throughout recorded history. The term bisexuality, however, like the terms hetero and homosexuality, was coined in the 19th century. The American Psychological Association states that sexual orientation falls along a continuum. In other words, someone does not have to be strictly homosexual or heterosexual, but can feel varying degrees of both. Sexual orientation develops across a person's lifetime. Different people realize at different positions in their lives that they are heterosexual, bisexual, or homosexual. Sexual attraction, behavior, and identity may also be incongruent. A sexual attraction or behavior may not necessarily be consistent with identity. Some individuals identify themselves as heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual, despite not having had any sexual experience. Others have had homosexual experiences but do not consider themselves to be gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Similarly, self-identified gay or lesbian individuals may occasionally sexually interact with members of the opposite sex, but do not identify as bi. The terms queer, polysexual, heteroflexible, homoflexible, men and women who sleep with the same sex can use these to describe sexual identity or identify sexual behaviour. Some sources state that bisexuality encompasses romantic or sexual attraction to all gender identities, or that it is a romantic or sexual attraction to a person irrespective of that person's biological sex or gender, equating it to or rendering interchangeable with pansexuality. The concept of pansexuality deliberately rejects the gender binary, the notion of two genders, and indeed of specific sexual orientations, as pansexual people are often open to relationships with people who don't identify as strictly men or women. However, this is the same with bi people. The phrase bisexual umbrella or bisexual community is used to describe any non-monosexual behaviours, attractions and identities, usually for purposes of collective action and challenging monosexist cultural assumptions. The term bisexual community includes those who identify as bisexual, pansexual, omnisexual, biromantic, polysexual or sexually fluid. In the 1940s, the zoologist Alfred Kinsey created the Kinsey scale to measure the continuum of sexual orientation from heterosexuality to homosexuality. Kinsey studied human sexuality and argued that people have the capability of being hetero or homosexual, even if these traits do not present itself in the current circumstances. The Kinsey scale is used to describe a person's sexual experience or response at a given time. It ranges from 0, meaning exclusively heterosexual, to 6, meaning exclusively homosexual. People who rank anywhere from 2 to 4 are often considered bisexual. They are often not fully one extreme or the other. The sociologists Martin S. Weinberg and Colin J. Williams wrote that, in principle, people who rank anywhere from 1 to 5 could be considered bisexual. The psychologist Jim McKnight writes that while the idea that bisexuality is a form of sexual orientation intermediate between homosexuality and heterosexuality is implicit in the Kinsey scale, that conception has been severely challenged since the publication of Homosexualities in 1978 by Weinberg and the psychologist Alan P. Bell. Ancient Greeks and Romans did not associate sexual relationships with well-defined labels, as modern Western society does. Men had male lovers who were not identified as homosexual and may have had wives or female lovers. Bisexuality goes back to ancient times. Ancient Greek religious texts reflecting cultural practices incorporated bisexual themes. The subtext varied from the mystical to the Didatic. Spartans thought that love and erotic relationships between experienced and novice soldiers would solidify combat loyalty and unit cohesion, and encourage heroic tactics as men vied to impress their lovers. Once the younger soldiers reached maturity, the relationship was supposed to become non-sexual, but it is not clear how strictly that was followed. There was some stigma attached to young men who continued their relationships with their mentors into adulthood. For example, Aristophanes called them euryprocti, meaning wide asses, and depicts them like women. Similarly, in ancient Rome, gender did not determine whether a sexual partner was acceptable, as long as a man's enjoyment did not encroach on another man's integrity. It was socially acceptable for a free-born Roman man to want sex with both female and male partners, as long as he took the penetrative role. The morality of the behaviour depended on the social standing of the partner, not gender per se. Both women and young men were considered normal objects of desire, but outside marriage, a man was supposed to act on his desires only with slaves. Prostitutes, who are also often slaves, and the infamies. It was immoral to have sex with another freeborn man's wife, his marriageable daughter, his underage son, or with the man himself. Sexual use of the other man's slave was subject to the owner's permission. Lack of self-control included in managing one's sex life indicated that a man was incapable of governing others. Too much indulgence in low sensual pleasure threatened to erode the elite male's identity as a cultured person. Alfred Kinsey conducted the first large surveys of homosexual behaviour in the United States during the 1940s. The results shocked the readers of his day because they made same-sex behaviour and attractions seem so common. His 1948 work, Sexual Behaviour in the Human Male, stated that among men, nearly half, 46% of the population, engaged in both heterosexual and homosexual activities, or reacts to a person of both sexes, in the course of their adult lives, and that 37% of the total male population was at least some overt homosexual experience to the point of orgasm since the onset of adolescence. Kinsey himself disliked the use of the term bisexual to describe individuals who engaged in sexual activity with both males and females, preferring to use bisexual in its original biological sense as hermaphroditic, stating, "Until it is demonstrated that taste in a sexual relation is dependent upon the individual containing within his anatomy both male and female structures or male and female psychological capacities, it is unfortunate to call such individuals bisexual." Although more recent researchers believe that Kinsey overestimated the rate of same-sex attraction, his work is considered pioneering and some of the most well-known sex research of all time. Some non-human animal species exhibit bisexual behaviours. Examples of mammals that display such behaviour include the bonobo, formerly known as the pygmy chimpanzee, orca, and the bottlenose dolphin. Examples of birds include some species of gulls and Humboldt penguins. Other examples of bisexual behaviour occur among fish and flatworms. What's also never addressed much is that during the AIDS crisis, bisexuals were treated just as harshly as the gay community, or even more to extent, due to the fact that society thought that at least it was contained within the gay community, there'd be no problem. But because bi slept with both sexes, they feared that no one would be safe from the AIDS virus. Because some bisexual people do not feel that they fit into either the gay or heterosexual world, and because they have a tendency to be invisible in public, some bisexual persons are committed to forming their own communities, culture, and political movements. Some who identify as bisexual may merge themselves into either homosexual or heterosexual society. Other bisexual people see this merging as an enforced rather than voluntary. Bisexual people can face exclusion from both homosexual and heterosexual society on coming out. Psychologist Beth Firestein states that bisexuals tend to internalize social tensions related to their choice of partners and feel pressured to label themselves as homosexuals instead of occupying the difficult middle ground where attraction to people of both sexes would defy society's value on monogamy. These social tensions and pressure may affect bisexuals' mental health, and specific therapy methods have been developed for bisexuals to address this concern. Bisexuals' behaviour are also associated in popular culture with the men who engage in same-sex activity while otherwise presenting as heterosexual. The majority of such men said to be living on the down low do not self-identify as bisexual. However, this may be a cultural misconception closely related to that of other LGBT individuals who hide their actual orientation due to social pressures, a phenomenon colloquially called being closeted. More people come out as gay or lesbian than they do bi. In addition to the discrimination associated with homophobia, bisexuals frequently contend with discrimination from the LG part of the community itself. The belief that everyone is bisexual, bisexuality does not exist, as unique identity is common. This stems from two views. In the heterosexist view, people are presumed to be sexually attracted to the opposite sex, and it is sometimes reasoned that a bisexual person is simply a heterosexual person who is sexually experimenting. In the monosexist view, it is believed that people cannot be bisexual unless they are equally sexually attracted to both sexes, regulating sexual orientation to being about the sex or gender one prefers. In this view, people are either exclusively homosexual or exclusively heterosexual. Closeted homosexual people who wish to appear heterosexual or heterosexuals who are experimenting with their sexuality. Assertions that one cannot be bisexual unless equally sexually attracted to both sexes, however, are disputed by various researchers who have reported bisexuality to fall on a continuum like sexuality in general. Male bisexuality is particularly presumed to be non-existent, with sexual fluidity studies adding to the debate. In 2005, researchers Gerald Roeger and Meredith L. Chivers and J. Michael Bailey used penile philosophy to measure the arousal of self-identified bisexual men to pornography involving only men and women. Participants were recruited via advertisement in gay-oriented magazines and an alternative paper. They found that self-identified bisexual men in their sample had genital arousal patterns similar to either homosexual or heterosexual men. The authors concluded that in terms of behaviour and identity, bisexual men clearly exist, but that the male bisexuality had not been shown to exist with respect to arousal or attraction. The assertion of Bailey that for men arousal his orientation was criticised by fairness and accuracy in reporting as simplification which neglects to account for behaviour and self-identification. Further, some researchers hold that the technique used in the study to measure genital arousal is too crude to capture the richness that constitutes sexual attraction. The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force called the study and the New York Times coverage of it flawed and biphobic. The American Institute of Bisexuality stated that Bailey's study was misinterpreted and misreported by both the New York Times and its critics. In 2011, Bailey and other researchers reported that among men with a history of several romantic and several sexual relationships with members of both sexes, high levels of sexual arousal were found in response to both male and female sexual imagery. The subjects were recruited from a Craigslist group for men seeking intimacy with both members of a heterosexual couple. The authors said that this change in recruitment strategy was an important difference, but it may not have a representative sample of bisexual identified men. They concluded that bisexual identified men with bisexual arousal patterns do indeed exist, but could not establish whether such a pattern is typical of bisexual identified men in general. Bisexual erasure is the tendency to ignore, remove, falsify or re-explain evidence of bisexuality in culture, history, academia, news, media and other primary sources. In its most extreme form, bisexual erasure includes denying that bisexuality exists or trying to replace it with other terms such as pan. Also, some non-binary people are trying to erase bisexuals because they fear that bisexuality does not include them, when in fact it does. It is often a manifestation of biphobia, although it does not necessarily involve overt antagonism. There is increasingly inclusion and visibility of bisexual, particularly in the LGBT community. American psychologist Beth Firestone writes that since she wrote the first book on bisexuality in 1996, bisexuality has gained visibility, although progress is uneven and awareness of bisexuality is still minimal or absent in many or more of the remote regions of our country and internationally. Well, that's all for today on the subject. If you like this video, hit the like. And if you haven't, then please show support by subscribing to my channel and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any updates or uploads. Until next time, folks, take care, be well.